Hello, this is the Red Riot Robot coming to you with a logging catch-up. I've been renovating my bedroom, aka where I record, and so I really haven't had a place to do anything. And instead of making a bunch of videos or just forgetting about the last few months, I figured I would do a recording of everything that I've played up until June. So this is logging the first half of 2026. Alright, first up, I started this year playing Fear 2 because I loved Fear so much from 2 years ago. And boy, this was a letdown. I think this suffered hard because it came into existence in the era of the Xbox 360, and so it feels like a PC game that was hatcheted together to become a console game, and it just feels like a lesser version of the first game in a lot of ways. I think that the plot is kind of interesting, and there's a major moment at the end that's kind of interesting, but I honestly have no interest to replay the second game ever again. I just don't enjoy it. I think everything it does is done better by the first game, and there's other indie games out there that do everything Fear does just as well, or maybe even better in some ways. The next game I played was Fear 3. Man, I have a very different opinion of this than I think the rest of the world, which is I kind of enjoyed it. I don't think it's like a great Fear game as far as like the story and stuff goes, but as like one of those digestible co-op experience games that was really popular in the 7th generation, I think it's really good. I would play it in a heartbeat over Fear 2, which I know will not make me a popular person, but screw it. I was going into Fear 3 thinking that it would be miserable, and I kind of came out of it really enjoying it. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is I've gotten into this series by Divide the Plunder, or Mark French, that are these things called mosaics. I talked about a couple of them last year, and I'm not going to go into any more detail in the future. Just know that I will just bring them up occasionally, and I enjoyed it, and that's it. Next, I played Dynasty Warriors Origins Visions of 4 Heroes. This was the DLC that added basically the equivalent of an entire campaign to the game. It's actually like 4 mini campaigns, basically what if scenarios, and I think it was good. It introduces an interesting like military mode that I wish just became a roguelike instead of what it was. I can't recommend this to anyone that's not like a hardcore Dynasty Warriors fan. If you just kind of enjoyed Origins or kind of enjoyed a Dynasty Warriors game, I don't think this DLC is necessary for you. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's worth it for the average person to purchase this game along with the game, unless you get them both in like a package for a severe discount. 4, Conscript. This has been in my backlog for a very long time. I finally got to it. This is the survival horror game set in World War I, where you play as a conscripted soldier in, well, World War I. You're French. You mostly fight German dudes. I think it is an extremely well put together game. I think it does suffer from a couple of things, which is it's a little too clunky for me to desire to want to go through it again to try to get some of the different endings, because it's one of those games like specifically Silent Hill, where if you play the game in a different way, you'll get a different ending. And one of those endings, it requires you to like not fight too many people. And this game's kind of weird in which it rewards not killing people but also punishes because you're in the trenches with big guys with, you know, guns. But if you kill them, rats with the plague will start spawning on the corpses and they can infect you and get you sick. It's one of those things where you got to consider how you get through things, and I really don't want to go through this on like a passive run. It just doesn't feel like it for me. But I do think it was still at least one good playthrough, and I did love going through it. I think it had very good emotional strong points. I think the best point that there was when you finally get to that moment where like, are you gonna go over the top and go charge the enemy fortress? And you do, and it's brutal, and it's like non-stop, I don't want to say action, but conflict, until finally it just kind of everything gets too quiet. I would recommend this. There's so many really good horror games coming out in the indie space, but I do recommend this at least for one playthrough, just to kind of experience it, because it is a unique thing. It's not just another zombie game. And that was everything I played in January. Next, we have February. First thing I played was Demon Turf. Demon Turf is a 2.5D platformer, and I mostly played this because I played the demo for Demon Tides and loved it a lot, and I kind of wanted to play this before I played Demon Tides, which came out, and we'll be getting into that later. Overall, I think Demon Turf is okay. I don't think you need to play it to get into Demon Tides, and again, we'll talk about that later, but it's fine. Next, I played Nice Day for Fishing. I was gifted this by a friend. I think he just got a code somehow. I'm not sure. Thanks, Brian. I don't have a lot to say. This is that fishing game based on the sketch show by Viva something. I think this game probably plays a lot better on the phone, because as a PC game or a console game, it's kind of not a lot going on. But if I had this on my phone, it'd be a nice game to pop open while I'm taking a dump, and I could see people playing this for 4 or 5 minutes at a time. It's not really the sit down and play type of game. And honestly, I think that's respectable as far as, a game goes. Next, I played another horror game called Chrysal, Theater of Idols. This is the horror game from, I believe, Spain, where the big gimmick is all of the guns shoot your own blood as ammunition. This is a game that I think starts out fantastic. However, once you get, I would say, the tier 3 upgrades for weapons, the enemies stop being threats to you, and the game gives you enough blood to keep you always going, even on higher difficulties, because I played this on the hardest difficulty available. I don't think there was ever a point where I thought that the game was bad, but there was a point where things kind of stopped being scary, and that's kind of a shame in a horror game. I do think the puzzles in this game were actually pretty good. Something I don't like about modern, like Resident Evil, is that a lot of the puzzles are kind of brain dead, and I like it when a game actually puts a real puzzle in front of me. I know I'm a weirdo because a lot of people hate puzzles, but I like them. I do think that if this developer goes on to make a sequel for this, and they kind of sort out the balancing in the midway through, the biggest thing this game needs is a big bruiser enemy that takes a lot of bullets to put down. They have a couple of mini bosses that are like that, but those are mini bosses. You need a regular enemy that can absorb a lot of damage alongside these, a lot of the enemies that take, somewhere between 2 to 3 shots to kill once you upgrade your pistol. And sometimes it takes 1 shot to kill enemies with the pistol towards the end. I definitely recommend it. Just for aesthetic alone. And again, it's at least a unique horror game, not zombies. You're fighting puppets with your blood, and so that's an interesting thing. All right, next I played Kotama and Academy Citadel. This is a Metroidvania with a kind of interesting time mechanic, but the platforming is a little finicky, honestly. I don't have a lot to say about this. This was kind of there. I enjoyed it when I was playing it, but I could not tell you anything that happened in it, so on to the next. Reanimal. This is made by Tarsier, I hope I'm saying that right, Studios, and these are the guys that made Little Nightmares 1 and 2. And the reality is, I think they still got it. I think this game is a little bit more esoteric and a little harder to read than even Little Nightmares. And Little Nightmares isn't straight up front with you, but even this is a little bit more vague in what it's about. And I think a lot less people will understand it, unfortunately. But I did enjoy it, and honestly, they still got it. I think they're going to be making some DLC, but it's a great example of how to make one of these, especially compared to Little Nightmares 3, which was... I played the demo for that, and I was highly unimpressed with it. Man, I gotta talk about it finally, which is Romeo is a Dead Man. And, man, I love Suda51 and Grasshopper Manufacturer. I love their aesthetics. I love their, like, concepts and stuff. I love their stories. It's a real shame they can never get a good budget for anything, or funding gets cut like it got cut here. I like Romeo as a Dead Man. I don't know if I can recommend it to just a random person who's not a Suda51 fan or a Grasshopper Manufacturer fan, because this isn't even Suda51 directed. I would have to look up the director's name. And this does a lot of good things. Unfortunately, you can tell this game is like stapled together in a lot of ways, and in some ways it suffers for that. Unfortunately, I think the the second level, the non-tutorial level, the mall is a great example of this, where it feels huge and empty for no reason. It feels like we were supposed to have more going on there, and it's just, there's nothing there. You have the little zombie raising mechanic where you can raise like 4 zombies. Well, I think they're called freakers or something, or super freaks, or no, they're called rotters. They're called rotters, and you can grow rotters in a garden on your spaceship, and they get random names, and they do different little abilities, and they basically kind of function as like special abilities. Oh, and also how progression works in this game is nonsensical. Like, you can unlock every weapon by just purchasing it, and there's no reason not to do that. I do think that this game's story is probably one of the more interesting ones from Grasshopper. We haven't gotten something like this in a while. It's a better version of what they were going for with Shadows of the Damned, as far as like relationships and stuff go, and I like it for that. But if you're looking for an action game that's like really cool and all this other stuff, I still recommend, if you haven't played it yet, just go to get No More Heroes and No More Heroes 2, because Romeo is a Dead Man, while I love it, it's not a game I can easily recommend to just random people. Alright, this is the big one. I had been playing this game for 3 months before I had finished it at February. In fact, I finished it in the middle of February, and that is Baldur's Gate 3. Finally finished it, played through all of it. It took me a long time. I had a lot of other side things I was playing in the middle. And yeah, overall, I understand all the Game of the Year nominations and wins. It has a fantastic soundtrack. The writing's great. It's a fantastic just RPG all around. I don't think it's my favorite RPG, but I think that's been settled for me for a long time. I imagine people who are really, really into D&D can have a lot of fun really experimenting with this game and seeing what works together. A lot of people seem to really like Acts 1 and 2 and didn't like 3, whereas I'm kind of weird where I liked 1. 2 I enjoyed, but it started losing me because I just don't like that type of setting, and I'll get into that maybe on a later date, but I loved Act 3. I know it's a bit buggier, but I love Act 3 and its setup and everything that's going on, and genuinely, to me, one of the more fun segments of the game. I will say, like, the big finale has some issues with it. Again, maybe another day I'll do a video where I just talk about Baldur's Gate 3 alone, but outside of the finale, for me, Act 3 was the best part of the game. I'm glad that I finally played through all of Baldur's Gate 3, and it was worth it. Good job, Larian. You did make a 10 out of 10. To start off March, I played Resident Evil Requiem, or Resident Evil 9. Honestly, this is pretty good. I have one problem with it, which is that it's sort of a celebration of Resident Evil, and by doing that, they decide to put both the action and the horror types of game in the same game, and I don't feel like either half of this game is as good as, say, something like Resident Evil 4 with the action, or as good as like the horror with, say, Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 2, or one of those. And because of that, so in the end, it kind of feels like it suffers from inconsistency, because neither of these types of gameplay are bad in the game, but they're just not as good as previous entries. However, this is still an excellent game. Capcom still knows what they're doing with Resident Evil, and yeah, this is fantastic. Next, I replayed an old favorite of mine from when I was like in high school, which is Condemned Criminal Origins. I had the sad realization that this game has been delisted on all digital storefronts. Fortunately, I do still own it, so man, I miss this like early 7th gen type of game where it was still kind of experimental, but it was cheap enough to where they could put a few of these out. I wish we had gotten Condemned 2 on PC at some point, but it never came, unfortunately. Demon Tides. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I had played this after I had played the demo for it, and I have to say, after playing the first game and then playing this game, skip that first game and just go straight to this. You're not missing much. This is a fantastic 3D platformer. It's one of the best I've ever played, and I highly recommend it. Then, smaller games that I played throughout March, Meat Grinder and Severed Steel. Both fast-paced first-person shooters. One is about constantly moving and never stopping, and the other one is about kind of destructible environments and wall running. After that, I played Homura Hime. I've been keeping an eye on this for quite a while. This is inspired by the gameplay of Nier Automata. I think this game is actually really good for a much smaller team and for their first game out. I think it has a couple of issues here and there, especially the final couple of bosses feel not quite well thought out. And I say the final bosses, I mean like one phase in each of the last couple of bosses is a little annoying and doesn't feel quite right for this type of game. However, I think that for a character action game, if you've been missing stuff, I highly recommend it. On to April. At the start, I played Sprawl, another fast-paced first-person shooter where you run on walls and stuff. I thought it was pretty good. I kind of liked the setting, and having played Sprawl Zero, the sequel or prequel, I'm not sure, demo, I'm actually looking forward to that after having played this. Another couple of small games that I played that I don't want to talk too much about: SpongeBob SquarePants and the Cosmic Shake, and The Plucky Squire. SpongeBob SquarePants is a neat little 3D platformer. It's okay. I don't know why it has that title, even after playing that game. And The Plucky Squire was good, but kind of disappointing. I don't think it used its gimmick to its fullest, which is a bit of a shame, honestly, because I kind of like its aesthetic and what it's going for. I just feel it doesn't reach its full potential. Next, Mouse PI for Hire. This is the 2.5D first-person shooter, or a boomer shooter, as people call them, whatever you want to call it. I think this is pretty good. I think all the bosses are pretty good, and I think all of the guns feel really good to use, and that's very important. I do think it suffers from what I call the workhorse combo in first-person shooters, where the player ends up feeling like they only have to use like two specific weapons, and those two weapons in this game are the James gun, aka the Tommy gun, or the shotgun, and both of those are pretty good and will get you through 99% of all combat. And I feel like the game should have balanced out a little bit better, but it is still really good with a lot of interesting enemies and some of the funnest boss fights in first-person shooting I've had. So there's that. And finally, to round out April, we had Pragmata. This is the hacking / third-person shooting game from Capcom, and man, they really nailed this one out of the park. This is some of the most hectic and fun combat I've had in a very long time. I love all the different builds you can make in this game. I love how the hacking feels intuitive, alongside the combat itself. The guns themselves feel good to shoot. I don't think there's really any problems, and also just a really good but somewhat simple story. I don't think a story needs to be complicated. If you've read or seen anything like Journey to the West, or any, child is with a older mentor figure, you kind of know what's going to happen, and that's okay, but it still works for this type of game. Pragmata is going to the top of my list of games of this year, and yeah, this is fantastic. And that's April. May, I started out with playing Replaced. This is the cyberpunk AI game where you play as an AI who's taken over a person's body. This has kind of been an indie game that's taken a while to come out, and I was very interested in it, and it was fine. It's basically one of those like realistic explorer games where you don't have like super jumps or anything, but you have very linear levels, and the action is 2D free flow combat. It's solid. The story itself is fine. After that, I played Forbidden Solitaire. I actually really like this game a lot. I really hope the devs add something like a roguelike mode to it. The story itself isn't that groundbreaking or anything, but the entire presentation and the fact that this is all a version of what Windows Solitaire calls Tri-Peaks Solitaire. I don't know what you call this type of solitaire, where you like select a card that's next in line in the count. But I enjoy this a lot. You get special upgrades. They put obstacles in your way in this game that are very different from each other. Some harm you when you pick them. Some make it to where it cancels out your combo. Sometimes you can't select certain cards on the grid because they're highlighted in an area. And it's just a really clever version of this type of solitaire. And if you ever wanted something like it, I highly recommend this. Next, Motor Slice. This is the Prince of Persia-like game that's specifically about taking down giant construction vehicles and robots, and this was very good. I think there's some finicky with like the basic jump where it feels like it goes a little too far and could be a little higher, but otherwise I think it's a really, really good version of this type of platforming, because we haven't gotten something like this in so long. Some people might point at like Uncharted, but that's not quite what the Prince of Persia games were, and this is more that. Oh, also, I'm just gonna like make it clear, this game is like some dude's waifu material that he made into a game, and good on him. But it's very blatant that he loves this character. About on the level with like Toriyama and Lightning for Final Fantasy XIII. After that, I went and replayed the Last Stand collection, which is like a kind of tower defense. No. It's a defense thing where you keep zombies away for a time period. These were some old Flash games back when I was in middle school, and I just kind of wanted some nostalgia. I had a good time playing through them, and yeah, there's not much to say there. After that, I played Occlude. This is like a puzzle solitaire game that you have to figure out what this puzzle is specifically for each version of Solitaire, and solve it in the way the game wants you to. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. Finally, in May, I played 007 First Light, and the way I would describe this game is a jack of all trade, master of none. I don't think it's necessarily bad in any of those jack of all trade selections, but it doesn't excel in any area where I could recommend it wholly to someone who likes one of those individual areas. Because the game is basically split into 3 types of gameplay. You have the Hitman style stealth stuff, you have melee combat, and you have good old-fashioned third-person shooting. The Hitman style social stealth is, in my opinion, okay for this game. It's serviceable for what it needs to be. The melee combat reminds me a lot of Sleeping Dogs, but it doesn't have the amount of breadth that game has, which is a shame, because this game, if it had a bit more, I would love this melee combat. To me, the best part is the third-person shooting, mostly because a lot of the gadgets you get are based around your more intense combat moments, and that's when you get to have a lot more fun. Also, this game has the most exploding barrel or environmental explosion things I've ever seen in a video game, and I kinda love it. Next, June was a light month because I decided to finally knuckle down and finish my room, and so I only played 3 games. First, Luna Abyss. This is a first-person shooter that's got like bullet hell elements. It actually kind of feels like a Metroid Prime game, and my biggest issue is that you only get like 4 weapons, and they're fine. They feel good to use, but I don't know. I never felt like the weapon selection kind of fit together properly. The story itself is solid, honestly. I feel bad because the devs got shut down. It didn't do well, so yeah. But it's a decent first-person shooter if you can get it for like 15 bucks. Next, I played Mina the Hollower, and this is the new game from Yacht Club, the guys who made Shovel Knight. This is really, really good. I recommend it. If you want something that's kind of Legend of Zelda-like, especially like the Game Boy versions of it, I highly recommend this. It's fantastic. I love the writing in this game. There's a moment towards the end that is one of the most ballsy things I've seen a game do, and I kind of love it. And finally, the last game I played in June was 13, spelled out XIII. This was the Ubisoft first-person shooter from like the 6th gen that starred the guy from X-Files. He was the main character. Also, Adam West plays a general that you're friends with. This game's kind of impressive for a lot of the things it did at the time. Enemies are actually dynamically reactive to what you do. Sometimes enemies will see a gun that's better than what they have and go for that instead of continue using the pistol they have. Enemies don't shoot you if you're holding one of their own hostage. It differentiates between lethal and non-lethal damage, and just a bunch of other things that are kind of interesting. From what I remember when I first played it when I was a lot younger, I remember getting to a point where I felt it lost steam and just wasn't as good going forward. And yeah, that happened again, and it's like the submarine section. It gets better after that, but it's never as good as it was in like the first few missions. Also, this game committed one of the ultimate sins, which is it ended on a cliffhanger, and there has not been any sign of a sequel coming, and I doubt we'll get one, unfortunately. Because I kind of enjoyed this game, and I enjoyed the conspiracy plot stuff that was going on and all that other stuff. It was pretty good, but some parts haven't held up over time. Especially those boss fights. Boy, there was a helicopter boss fight, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember every first-person shooter had one of these. They all kind of sucked. And that's it for the first half of this year. I would like to take a little bit of time to kind of address I've been out for several months. I posted a few things on YouTube explaining where I was. Mostly, I've just been fixing up my room. It really needed it. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I now have a pseudo recording box. I have it to where I can now run the air conditioner and the mic won't pick it up. So I don't have to worry about sweating my ass off in 90-degree weather as the room slowly boils me. And yeah, look forward to more videos. I have some other stuff in the works currently, and my typical monthly videos will always be there. And I'm planning to do more scripted content going forward. No promises on what that is yet, because I learned my lesson. And that's it. This is the Red Riot Robot, signing out.